I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. I inherited a cabin while my son got a Miami penthouse. When my daughter-in-law mocked me, "Fits you perfectly, you stinking old woman," and kicked me out, I decided to spend a night at the cabin. You know, there are moments in life when everything you thought you knew gets turned upside down in the span of a single breath. I'm Cynthia Lewis, and at 68 years old, I thought I'd experienced every kind of heartbreak life could throw at me. I buried my beloved husband, James, 3 years ago, raised my son, Noah, through his rebellious teens, and even welcomed his wife, Abigail, into our family with open arms. I was wrong about having seen it all. It started on a gray Tuesday morning in November when I returned from visiting my sister Emma in Vermont. The taxi dropped me off at Noah's beautiful colonial house in Westchester County, where I'd been living since James passed. The autumn leaves crunched under my feet as I walked up the familiar stone pathway, my heart lighter than it had been in weeks. Emma had lifted my spirits with stories about her grandchildren, and I was eager to share them with Noah and Abigail. But something felt different the moment I stepped through the front door. The house was unusually quiet, and there was a tension in the air that made my skin prickle. I called out, but no one answered. That's when I saw them sitting in the living room. Noah in his expensive navy suit looking uncomfortable, and Abigail perched on the edge of the sofa like a predator ready to strike. Her perfectly manicured fingers drummed against her designer handbag, and her cold blue eyes met mine with an expression I'd never seen before. "Mom," Noah said, his voice strained. "We need to talk." My stomach dropped. In my experience, conversations that started with those words never ended well. I set down my small suitcase and took a seat across from them, trying to ignore the way Abigail's lips curved into what could barely be called a smile. "What's going on?" I asked, though part of me already knew I didn't want to hear the answer. Noah cleared his throat and pulled out a thick manila envelope. "Dad's lawyer called yesterday. There were some final details about the inheritance that needed to be settled." He paused, glancing nervously at Abigail, who nodded encouragingly. Apparently, Dad left specific instructions about how certain properties should be distributed. My heart began to race. James had always been meticulous about our finances, but he'd never mentioned any special instructions to me. "What kind of instructions?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Abigail leaned forward, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Oh, Cynthia, honey, I'm so sorry you have to hear this, but it seems James left Noah the penthouse in Miami Beach. You know, the one overlooking Biscayne Bay, 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, that gorgeous terrace with the infinity pool." I nodded slowly. James and I had vacationed there many times over the years. It was worth at least $2 million, maybe more. "And what about the cabin in upstate New York?" I asked. Though the silence that followed was deafening, Noah shifted in his seat, unable to meet my eyes. It was Abigail who delivered the blow with surgical precision. "That old thing went to you," she said, her voice taking on a mocking tone. "You know, the little shack by Lake George that hasn't been updated since the 1970s. No central air, that tiny kitchen, the creaky floors." She paused, letting each word sink in like poison. "Honestly, it fits you perfectly. You stinking old woman." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my face flush with shame and disbelief. Noah's head snapped up, and for a moment, I thought he might defend me. Instead, he just looked away, his cowardice as clear as daylight. "Abigail," he said weakly. "That's not necessary." "What?" she said, her voice rising with false innocence. "I'm just being honest. The cabin needs so much work. And let's face it, Cynthia's at that age where she should be downsizing anyway. It's actually perfect for her. Simple, manageable. No stairs to worry about breaking a hip on." I sat there absorbing the cruelty of her words, the casual way she dismissed my worth, my dignity, my place in my own son's life. This woman, who I'd welcomed into our family, who I'd helped plan her wedding to my son, who I'd cooked countless meals for, was speaking to me like I was nothing more than an unwanted burden. "I think," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper, "I should go pack my things." Abigail's smile grew wider. "Actually, Cynthia, We've already taken care of that for you. Your suitcases are by the front door. We thought it would be easier this way. You know, a clean break. Noah finally found his voice. Mom, we're not kicking you out. It's just that Abigail's pregnant, and we need the space for the nursery and her home office. Pregnant, the word escaped me like a gasp. This was the first I'd heard of it. Abigail placed a protective hand over her still flat stomach, her eyes gleaming with triumph. 12 weeks. We wanted to wait until we were sure before telling anyone. But yes, you're going to be a grandmother again. She paused, tilting her head with mock concern. Of course, we'll need you to respect our boundaries as new parents. The cabin will give you the perfect opportunity to find your own life again. Find my own life again, as if the life I'd built, the family I'd nurtured, the love I'd given had been some kind of temporary arrangement that was now inconvenient to them. I stood up on shaking legs and walked to the front door, where indeed my belongings had been packed into 4 suitcases. 43 years of marriage, 35 years of motherhood, reduced to 4 pieces of luggage sitting on the marble foyer floor like abandoned pets. The keys to the cabin are in the side pocket of the blue suitcase, Abigail called from the living room. Drive safely. Cynthia, those mountain roads can be dangerous for someone your age. I didn't trust myself to speak. I simply picked up 2 of the suitcases and walked out the door, leaving the other 2 for my second trip to the taxi that Noah had apparently already called for me. As I loaded my life into the trunk of a stranger's car, I caught a glimpse of Abigail watching from the window, that satisfied smirk never leaving her face. The drive to Lake George took 3 hours. 3 hours of numbness, of disbelief, of trying to process how my life had changed so dramatically in the span of 20 minutes. The taxi driver, a kind man named Carlos, tried to make conversation, but I could barely manage more than one-word responses. How do you explain to a stranger that you've just been discarded by your own family like yesterday's newspaper? When we finally pulled up to the cabin, my heart sank even further. Abigail hadn't been exaggerating about its condition. The small log structure looked tired and neglected, its windows dark, the wraparound porch sagging slightly under the weight of accumulated leaves. The dock extending into the lake was missing several boards, and the whole property had an air of abandonment that matched exactly how I felt inside. Carlos helped me carry my suitcases to the front door, his weathered face creased with concern. You sure you'll be all right out here by yourself? Lady, it's pretty isolated. I managed a weak smile. I'll be fine. Thank you for your kindness. But as his taillights disappeared into the gathering dusk, I wasn't sure I would be fine at all. I fumbled with the old-fashioned key, my hands shaking from cold and emotion, and finally managed to get the door open. The smell hit me first, not musty or unpleasant, but familiar. Pine wood and old leather, coffee, and something else I couldn't quite identify. I flipped the light switch, half expecting nothing to happen, but warm yellow light flooded the small living room. And that's when I saw it. The room wasn't neglected at all. Someone had been maintaining it, caring for it. The furniture was simple but comfortable. The hardwood floors gleamed with fresh polish, and there was even a small stack of firewood next to the stone fireplace. On the mantel sat a framed photograph I'd never seen before. James, as a young man, standing in front of this very cabin with an elderly woman I didn't recognize. I set down my suitcases and walked closer to examine the photo. On the back, in James's familiar handwriting, were the words, "With Eleanor Jefferson, 1962, the place where everything began." Eleanor Jefferson. James had never mentioned anyone named Eleanor. His parents had died when he was young, and he'd always said he had no other family. I turned the frame over in my hands, studying the woman's face. She had kind eyes and a gentle smile, and she was looking at young James with obvious affection. My exploration was interrupted by a knock at the door. My heart leaped into my throat. Who could possibly know I was here? I approached the door cautiously and peered through the small window. An elderly man stood on the porch, holding what appeared to be a casserole dish. "Mrs. Lewis," he called. "I'm Walter Jackson from next door. I saw the lights come on." I opened the door hesitantly. "I'm sorry. Do we know each other?" Walter smiled warmly. Not personally, but James told me all about you. I've been keeping an eye on the place, just like he asked me to. He held out the casserole dish. Made you some beef stew. Figured you might be hungry after your trip. James asked you to keep an eye on the place, I repeated, confused. When did you speak to James? Walter's expression grew gentle. About a week before he passed. Mrs. Lewis. He came up here one last time. Spent 3 days going through things, organizing. Said his Cynthia would be coming here eventually. And when she did, she'd need friends nearby. He paused, studying my face. He said to tell you something specific. He said to tell you that sometimes the most valuable treasures are hidden in the most unexpected places, and that Eleanor's legacy was finally coming home where it belonged. He handed me the casserole dish. He also said to check the loose floorboard under the kitchen table when you were ready for the truth. Before I could ask what he meant, Walter tipped his hat and walked back into the darkness, leaving me standing in the doorway with a casserole dish and more questions than answers. I closed the door and leaned against it, my mind reeling. James had been here a week before he died. He'd made arrangements for someone to watch over the place. He'd left me a message about checking under the kitchen table, and he'd mentioned someone named Eleanor, whose legacy belonged to me. I walked slowly to the small kitchen, my heart pounding. The table was simple pine, scarred from years of use. I got down on my hands and knees, running my fingers along the floorboards until I found one that gave slightly under pressure. With some effort, I pried it up. Inside the small space beneath, wrapped in oilcloth, was a metal box. With trembling hands, I lifted it out and carried it to the kitchen table. The box wasn't locked, and when I opened it, I gasped. Inside were documents, photographs, and a letter addressed to me in James's handwriting. But it was what lay beneath the letter that made my blood run cold with shock and recognition. Land deeds, bank statements, legal documents, and at the bottom, a geological survey report dated just 6 months before James's death. The cabin I'd been given as a consolation prize, the worthless shack that Abigail had mocked me with, was sitting on top of one of the largest undeveloped mineral deposits in upstate New York. My hands shook as I picked up James's letter, but before I could read it, my phone rang. Noah's name appeared on the screen. "Mom," his voice was strained, almost panicked. "Where are you? Abigail's been calling and calling. She's worried about you driving in the dark." I almost laughed. Worried about me driving in the dark, after throwing me out of my home like garbage. "I'm at the cabin. Noah," I said calmly. "Good. Listen, Mom, about earlier. Abigail didn't mean what she said. She's just emotional because of the pregnancy hormones. You know how women get this from the son I'd raised to respect and value others." "I'm sure she didn't mean it," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "Exactly. So why don't you just stay there tonight? Get some rest, and we can talk more tomorrow about finding you something more suitable. Maybe one of those nice senior communities with activities and medical care nearby." I looked down at the geological report in my hands, at the estimated value of the mineral rights, at the photographs of James with Eleanor, at the deed that made me not Noah, not Abigail, but me the sole owner of what they thought was worthless land. "That sounds like a wonderful idea, Noah," I said sweetly. "You and Abigail just focus on your new family. Don't worry about me at all." After I hung up, I sat in the quiet cabin surrounded by James's secrets. And for the first time since walking out of Noah's house, I smiled. Because Walter had been right about one thing: sometimes the most valuable treasures are hidden in the most unexpected places. And my treasure hunt was just beginning. I spent the entire night reading James's letter by the light of the old kitchen lamp, my coffee growing cold as the truth of my husband's final gift slowly unfolded before me. His handwriting, so familiar yet somehow different in this context, revealed a man I thought I knew completely, but clearly didn't know at all. "My dearest Cynthia," the letter began. "If you're reading this, then my worst fears about Noah and his wife have come to pass. I pray I'm wrong, but I've seen the signs. Sweetheart, the way they look at our home like it's already theirs. The way Abigail speaks to you when she thinks I'm not listening. The way our son has slowly stopped defending you in small moments that reveal everything about his character." My heart ached as I read those words. James had seen what I'd been too blind or too hopeful to acknowledge. I need to tell you about Eleanor. The letter continued. Eleanor Jefferson was my grandmother, not by blood, but by choice. When I was 16 and my parents died in that car accident, Eleanor took me in. She owned this cabin and 300 acres of the most beautiful land in the Adirondacks. She was a geologist. Cynthia, one of the first women to graduate from Columbia with a degree in earth sciences back in 1923 when such things were almost unheard of. I paused, staring at the photograph on the mantel with new understanding. Eleanor hadn't just been kind to James. She'd been his salvation. Eleanor spent 40 years studying this land. James's letter went on. She knew what was beneath it long before the technology existed to prove it definitively. She made me promise that this land would never be sold to developers or mining companies who would destroy its beauty for profit. But she also made me promise that if our family ever faced hardship, if my wife ever needed security and independence, this land would provide it. I had to stop reading and walk outside onto the porch. The morning air was crisp and clean, and Lake George stretched out before me like a mirror reflecting the early autumn sky. 300 acres. I owned 300 acres of pristine Adirondack wilderness that happened to sit on top of a fortune in mineral deposits. Back inside, I continued reading. Cynthia, the geological survey I commissioned before my death confirms what Eleanor suspected all along. Beneath our land lies one of the largest untapped lithium deposits on the East Coast. With the electric vehicle revolution, lithium has become more valuable than gold. The mineral rights alone are worth between $50 and $70 million. I had to read that sentence 3 times before it sank in. 50 to 70 million. The worthless shack that Abigail had mocked me with was worth more than Noah's precious Miami penthouse by a factor of 25. But Cynthia, James's letter continued, I want you to know that you have choices. You can sell the mineral rights and live in luxury for the rest of your life. You can lease them and receive a steady income that will make you financially independent forever. Or you can do what I hope you'll do, use this gift to build something meaningful. Something that helps other women who find themselves discarded and devalued by families who should love them. Tears blurred my vision as I read the final paragraphs. I've watched you give everything to our family for 43 years. I've seen you sacrifice your own dreams to support mine. Put your own needs last to ensure Noah had every opportunity. Welcome Abigail with open arms, even when I could see she didn't deserve your kindness. You've been the foundation that held us all together, and I fear that without me there to remind them of your worth, they'll forget how precious you are. Don't let them. Cynthia, you are worth more than they can possibly understand, and now you have the means to prove it. The law firm of Chen, Washington and Associates in Albany has all the documentation you'll need. Patricia Chen has been waiting for your call. Remember that I loved you completely, that Eleanor would have adored you, and that sometimes the people who underestimate us give us the greatest gifts of all the motivation to show them exactly who we really are. All my love, always and forever. James P.S. Check the red tackle box in the hall closet. Eleanor left something there for the woman who would ultimately inherit her legacy. My hands were shaking as I set down the letter and walked to the hall closet. The red tackle box was right where James said it would be, sitting on the top shelf like it had been waiting for me all these years. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a small velvet jewelry box. When I opened it, I gasped. A ring. Not just any ring, but an extraordinary vintage emerald surrounded by diamonds, clearly from the 1920s. Beneath it was a note in spidery handwriting, for the woman brave enough to fight for what's rightfully hers. Eleanor Jefferson, 1994. I slipped the ring onto my right hand, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting 40 years for me to claim it. My phone rang, jarring me from my reverie. Noah's name appeared on the screen again. Mom, how are you settling in? His voice carried that forced cheerfulness that people use when they're trying to make themselves feel better about something they know is wrong. Very well, actually, I said, admiring Eleanor's ring as it caught the morning light. The cabin is quite comfortable. Good, good. Listen, I've been thinking. Maybe we were a bit hasty yesterday. Abigail feels terrible about what she said. I almost laughed. Abigail felt terrible, not because she'd been cruel, but because Noah was feeling guilty. Does she? I asked mildly. Of course, she's a good person. Mom, she just gets overwhelmed sometimes. Anyway, we were thinking maybe you could come back for dinner this weekend. We could talk about your future. Maybe look at some nice retirement communities together. That's very thoughtful, I said. But I'm quite busy here. Busy. Noah sounded confused. Doing what? Oh, just settling in, getting to know the neighbors. Walter Jackson has been very helpful, and I'm meeting with some people in town later today. What people? I could hear the suspicion creeping into his voice. Noah had always been possessive of information, needing to know and control every detail of situations that affected him. Just some local folks, nothing you need to worry about. I paused, letting him wonder. How's Abigail feeling? Morning sickness must be difficult. She's fine. Managing. His voice sounded strained. Look, Mom, about this cabin. I hope you're not getting too attached to the place. It's going to need a lot of work to be livable long term. And at your age... At my age, what? Noah? The question hung in the air between us. I could hear him struggling to find words that wouldn't sound as callous as they actually were. I just mean that practical considerations need to come first. Heating costs, maintenance, isolation. It's not really suitable for someone in your situation. My situation, elderly, discarded, dependent on their charity. I appreciate your concern, I said sweetly, but I think I'll manage just fine. After I hung up, I called the law firm James had mentioned. Patricia Chen was expecting my call, as James had predicted, and agreed to meet with me that afternoon in Albany. As I prepared to leave, I found a bifolded paper slip in the pocket of Noah's jacket, which he must have left behind during a previous visit. It was a receipt from Adirondack Surveying Services, dated 6 months ago, just after James had died. My heart tightened. Noah had been investigating the property values, even before the will was settled. The drive to Albany gave me time to think, to plan, to imagine the looks on Noah and Abigail's faces when they discovered what they'd actually given me. But more than that, it gave me time to remember who I used to be before I became someone who accepted being treated as disposable. Patricia Chen's office was in a sleek downtown building with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson River. Patricia herself was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who greeted me with a combination of professionalism and genuine warmth. Mrs. Lewis, she said, settling behind her polished desk. James spoke of you often during our meetings. He was very concerned about ensuring your security and independence. He never mentioned any meetings to me, I said. Patricia smiled. He wanted to surprise you. James spent the last year of his life setting up what he called Cynthia's insurance policy. He was quite specific about how things should be handled. She opened a thick file. First, let's discuss the mineral rights. The lithium deposit beneath your property is substantial. 3 major companies have already expressed interest in leasing agreements that would pay you approximately $12 million annually for the next 20 years. $12 million annually. The number was so large it felt abstract, like play money from a board game. However, Patricia continued, James also researched several other options. There's a growing market for sustainable extraction partnerships where you maintain ownership while companies use environmentally responsible methods to access the minerals. These arrangements typically pay less initially, but provide longer-term income and preserve the land's ecological integrity. What would James have wanted? I asked. Based on our conversations, I believe he'd want you to have choices. Financial security, yes, but also the ability to create something meaningful. He mentioned several times that you'd always talked about wanting to help other women, but never had the resources to do it. I thought about the women's shelter in town that was always struggling for funding, about the single mothers I'd met over the years who worked 2 jobs and still couldn't afford decent housing, about women like me who'd spent their lives caring for others only to be discarded when they were no longer convenient. What if I wanted to use some of the income to establish a foundation? I asked. Something that helps women who've been abandoned by their families. Patricia's eyes lit up. James said you might say exactly that. He had me research the legal structures for establishing a charitable foundation. Everything is already prepared. It just needs your signature. We spent the next 2 hours going over documents, legal protections, and financial projections. By the time I left Patricia's office, I understood exactly how wealthy I'd become and exactly how I wanted to use that wealth. But first, I had a family to deal with. As I drove back to Lake George, I noticed a familiar BMW parked near my cabin. Noah was standing on the dock, staring out at the water. When he heard my footsteps on the wooden planks, he turned with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Mom, we need to talk." "Do we?" I asked, joining him at the end of the dock. "Abigail's been asking questions about this place, about why Dad left it to you specifically. She thinks there might be something valuable here that we don't know about." Of course she did. Abigail's greed had radar for hidden assets. "What kind of something?" I asked innocently. Noah shifted uncomfortably. "I don't know. Land values? Maybe development potential? She thinks Dad might have had reasons for keeping this place that he didn't share with us." I looked out at the pristine lake, at the mountains rising in the distance, at the 300 acres of wilderness that was now mine to protect or exploit as I chose. "Your father was a very thoughtful man," I said carefully. "He always had reasons for his decisions." "Mom," Noah's voice took on the tone he'd used as a teenager when he wanted something. "If there is something valuable here, something we missed, we could work together, pool our resources, make sure everyone benefits fairly." Everyone, meaning him and Abigail. "That's very generous of you," I said, "especially considering that yesterday you and your wife made it clear that I was no longer welcome in your home or your life." Noah had the grace to look ashamed. "That was wrong. I know that. Abigail was emotional, and I should have handled things better." "Should have handled things better," I repeated. "Is that what you call watching your wife humiliate your mother and then helping her pack my bags?" "I'm sorry." The words came out strained, forced. "I'm truly sorry, but we're family. Mom, family forgives each other." I turned to face him fully. This man I'd raised from a baby, whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, whose dreams I'd supported even when they required sacrifices I could barely afford. "You're right," I said quietly. "Family does forgive each other. But first, Noah, family has to ask for forgiveness. Real forgiveness. Not the kind that comes with conditions and expectations of shared profits." Before he could respond, my phone buzzed with a text message from Abigail, even though she'd never texted me before in the 5 years she'd been married to my son. "Hi, Cynthia. Hope you're settling in well. Noah and I were thinking maybe we should have the cabin appraised, just for insurance purposes. Of course, family properties can be tricky. Let me know what you think. XOXO. I showed Noah the message. His face went white. "I didn't know she was going to text you," he said quickly. "That was her idea. Of course it was." I slipped the phone back into my pocket. "Noah, I want you to go home to your wife. Tell her that the cabin is perfectly insured and that she doesn't need to worry about family properties that don't belong to her." "Mom, tell her," I continued, my voice growing stronger, "that some gifts come with wisdom attached, and wisdom teaches us that not everything valuable can be measured in dollars." Noah stared at me for a long moment, as if seeing someone he didn't recognize. "You're different," he said finally. "No," I replied, touching Eleanor's ring where it sat on my finger. "I'm exactly who I've always been. You just forgot to look." As Noah's car disappeared down the mountain road, I stood alone on the dock, watching the sun set over my lake, my land, my future. Tomorrow I would begin implementing James's plan. I would establish the foundation, secure the mineral rights, and build something that would help women long after I was gone. But tonight, I simply stood in the gathering darkness, feeling the weight of Eleanor's ring on my finger and the power of James's love surrounding me like armor. For 43 years, I'd been Cynthia the wife, Cynthia the mother, Cynthia the woman who put everyone else's needs first. Tomorrow I would begin being Cynthia the foundation director, Cynthia the philanthropist, Cynthia the woman who owned a fortune and knew exactly how to use it. But first, I had one more phone call to make. I dialed Noah's number, and when he answered, his voice was wary. "Mom, Noah, I want you and Abigail to come for dinner tomorrow night. 7, hurry." There are some things about your father's legacy that I think you should understand. Really, that's wonderful. Abigail will be so relieved. Noah, I interrupted gently. This isn't a reconciliation dinner. This is an education. Tell Abigail to bring her appetite for truth. She's going to need it. I spent all of Thursday preparing for what would either be the most satisfying dinner of my life or the final destruction of my relationship with my son. By 5 Huzuru, the cabin smelled like my grandmother's pot roast. The table was set with Eleanor's good china that I'd found in the hutch, and I'd arranged James's documents in neat piles on the kitchen counter. At exactly 7 Huzurs, I heard car doors slam in the driveway. Through the window, I watched Noah and Abigail approach the cabin, their body language telling the whole story. Noah walked hesitantly, like a man approaching his own execution. Abigail strutted beside him with the confidence of someone who believed she was about to claim a prize. She'd dressed for the occasion in a cream-colored designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her blonde hair was swept into an elaborate updo, her makeup applied with professional precision. She looked like she was attending a real estate closing, not a family dinner. "Cynthia, she called out as I opened the door, her voice dripping with false warmth. "This place looks so much better in the evening light. You've really made it cozy." Cozy. The way she said it made it sound like a consolation prize for people with low expectations. "Thank you," I said, stepping aside to let them in. "I hope you brought your appetites." Noah hugged me awkwardly, his cologne unable to mask the nervous sweat I could smell beneath it. "Mom, the place really does look great. Very rustic." "Your father always loved it here," I said, watching their faces carefully. He said it reminded him of possibilities. Abigail's eyes were already scanning the room, cataloging every piece of furniture, every decoration, every potential indicator of hidden value. I could practically hear her calculating square footage and estimating renovation costs. "It has potential," she said, running her manicured finger along the mantelpiece. "With the right investment, this could be quite charming. Modernize the kitchen, add a master suite, maybe expand the deck." She paused at the photograph of James and Eleanor. "Who's this woman with James?" "That's Eleanor Jefferson," I said, beginning to serve dinner. "She was very important to your father." "I've never heard of her," Noah said, settling into his chair. "Dad never mentioned an Eleanor." "Your father was a private man about some things," I replied, ladling pot roast onto their plates. "He believed that some stories should be saved for the right moment." Abigail practically bounced in her seat. "Who was she? An old girlfriend or something?" The casual disrespect in her voice made my jaw clench, but I kept my expression neutral. "Eleanor was a remarkable woman, a geologist. She owned this land long before your father inherited it." "Inherited it?" Noah's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "I thought Dad bought this place." "No," I said, taking my seat across from them. "Eleanor left it to him when she died in 1994, along with some very specific instructions about what should be done with it." Abigail's eyes sharpened. I could see her brain working, processing this new information, searching for angles and opportunities. "What kind of instructions?" she asked, trying to sound casual. I smiled and took a bite of my pot roast. "Eat first, then we'll talk." The meal proceeded with painful small talk. Abigail gushed about the nursery they were planning, the organic baby food they would make, the private preschool they'd already researched. Noah talked about a promotion he was expecting, a new client he'd landed, the vacation they were planning to celebrate the pregnancy. Not once did either of them ask how I was adjusting to living alone, whether I needed anything, or if I was happy. Their self-absorption was so complete it was almost impressive. "This has been lovely," Abigail said as I cleared the dinner plates. "But we should probably head back soon. I get tired so easily these days." She placed her hand protectively over her stomach. "Being pregnant is exhausting." "Of course," I said. "But before you go, I have something to show you." I retrieved the metal box from the kitchen counter and set it on the dining table. Noah and Abigail stared at it with obvious curiosity. "Your father left this for me," I said, opening the box slowly, "along with some very interesting information about our family history. I pulled out the photograph of young James with Eleanor and placed it where they could both see it clearly. Eleanor Jefferson was born in 1901, I began, my voice taking on the cadence of a storyteller. She was one of the first women to graduate from Columbia University with a degree in geology. She spent her entire career studying the Adirondack Mountains, particularly this area around Lake George. Abigail yawned delicately. That's nice, Cynthia, but she was also, I continued, ignoring the interruption, remarkably prescient about what lay beneath the surface of this land. I pulled out the geological survey and set it on the table. Noah leaned forward to read it, his expression shifting from boredom to confusion to shock in the span of seconds. "What is this?" he whispered. "It's a geological survey your father commissioned 6 months before he died," I said calmly. He wanted to confirm what Eleanor had suspected for decades. Abigail snatched the document from Noah's hands, her eyes scanning the technical language with growing alarm. When she reached the section marked Estimated Value of Mineral Rights, her face went completely white. "This says," she had to clear her throat and start again. "This says there's lithium under this property worth 50 to 70 million. That's correct," I said, pulling out the mineral rights documentation. "As the sole owner of this land, I control access to one of the largest lithium deposits on the East Coast." The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the clock ticking on the mantelpiece, the wind rustling through the trees outside, the sound of Noah's labored breathing as he processed what I'd just told them. 50 million, Abigail repeated, her voice barely audible. "You're worth 50 million. Actually," I said, consulting Patricia Chen's calculations. "With the leasing agreements I've already negotiated, my annual income will be approximately $12 million for the next 20 years. So technically, I'm worth considerably more than 50 million. Noah's head snapped up. "Leasing agreements? What leasing agreements? I met with your father's attorney yesterday," I explained, enjoying the panic spreading across their faces. "Everything has been arranged. The first payment will be deposited into my account next month." Abigail stood up so quickly her chair toppled backward. "You can't do this. You can't make these kinds of decisions without consulting the family." "The family?" I asked mildly. "You mean the family that packed my bags and threw me out? The family that told me I was a stinking old woman who belonged in a shack? That family?" "I didn't mean that." Abigail's composure was cracking like ice in spring. "I was emotional. Pregnancy hormones. You can't hold one moment of anger against me forever." "One moment." I stood up slowly, feeling Eleanor's ring solid and powerful on my finger. "Abigail, sweetheart, let me tell you about moments. When you moved into my house, I gave you my master bedroom and took the guest room without complaint. When you redecorated my living room and threw away 40 years of memories, I smiled and said how lovely it looked. When you banned me from my own kitchen during holidays because you wanted to be the hostess, I graciously stepped aside." Each word hit her like a physical blow. Noah sat frozen, watching his wife's carefully constructed facade crumble. "Those weren't moments of anger," I continued. "They were consistent patterns of disrespect and cruelty that you thought I was too old and too powerless to challenge. You were wrong on both counts." "Noah!" Abigail whirled toward her husband. "Say something. Do something. She can't just steal what should belong to our children." Noah finally found his voice. "Mom, surely we can work something out. This affects all of us. The baby, our future plans." "Does it?" I asked. "Because yesterday you seemed quite satisfied with the arrangement. You got the Miami penthouse worth $2 million and I got the worthless cabin. Remember, you both made it very clear that this division was fair and appropriate." "We didn't know," Abigail screamed, abandoning all pretense of civility. "If we'd known about the mineral rights, obviously we would have discussed things differently." "Obviously," I agreed. "Which brings us to the heart of the matter. Doesn't it? You're not upset about fairness or family values. You're upset about money. Specifically money that you assumed would eventually be yours, but now realize will never be." I pulled out the final document from the box, my new will, prepared by Patricia Chen and already signed and notarized. "I thought you should know," I said conversationally, "that I've established the Eleanor Jefferson Foundation for Displaced Women. It will provide housing, legal assistance, and financial support for women who've been abandoned or abused by their families. The foundation will receive the bulk of my estate when I die. Noah's face had gone gray. You're giving away our inheritance. Your inheritance. I laughed, the sound sharp and clear in the quiet cabin. Noah, what exactly did you do to earn an inheritance? You're a healthy, educated, successful man with a lucrative career. Your wife comes from wealth. You have every advantage in life. What could you possibly need my money for? It's not about need, Abigail shouted. It's about family. It's about blood. That money should stay in the bloodline. Interesting philosophy, I said. Tell me, Abigail, when you called me a stinking old woman and kicked me out of my home, were you thinking about bloodlines then? When you mocked my inheritance and told me it fit me perfectly, were you honoring family bonds? She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice calm but implacable. You're both going to leave my property now. You're going to drive back to Westchester in your expensive car, return to your beautiful house, and continue your privileged lives. You'll raise your child with all the advantages money can buy. I paused, looking directly into Abigail's furious eyes. But you'll do it with the knowledge that the woman you treated like garbage is worth more than you'll ever be, and that your cruelty cost you the greatest windfall of your lifetime. You can't do this to us. Abigail's voice had become shrill, desperate. We'll contest the will. We'll prove you're mentally incompetent. You'll do nothing, I interrupted, because your father-in-law was brilliant, and his attorney is even more brilliant. Every document has been prepared to withstand any challenge you might mount. Every legal protection has been put in place. You have absolutely no claim to this land or its mineral rights. Noah finally stood up, his face a mask of defeat and disbelief. Mom, please think about what you're doing. We made mistakes, but we're still family. The baby is your grandchild. For a moment, just a moment, I felt my resolve waver. This was my son, after all, my only child, and the baby Abigail carried would be my grandchild. Then I remembered the casual cruelty in Abigail's voice when she'd called me names. I remembered Noah's cowardice as he'd watched his wife humiliate his mother. I remembered the suitcases packed and waiting by the front door like I was an unwanted house guest overstaying my welcome. Noah, I said softly, you'll always be my son, and I'll always love you. But love doesn't mean accepting abuse. It doesn't mean allowing people to treat you as disposable. And it certainly doesn't mean rewarding cruelty with wealth. I walked to the front door and opened it. Your child will be welcome in my life if you can teach them to treat others with respect and kindness. If you can't, then this conversation is exactly the kind of legacy they'll inherit from you. Abigail stalked past me without another word, her designer heels clicking angrily on the wooden porch. Noah paused at the threshold. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I really am sorry for how we treated you. I know you are, I replied. But sorry doesn't undo damage. Noah, it just acknowledges that damage was done. After their car disappeared into the darkness, I stood on my porch looking out over my lake, my mountains, my 300 acres of pristine wilderness. The night was clear and cold, with more stars visible than I'd ever seen from the city. I thought about James, about the careful way he'd planned this moment, the love that had motivated him to protect me even after his death. I thought about Eleanor, the pioneering woman who'd built a legacy of independence and strength that had now passed to me, and I thought about tomorrow, when I would begin the real work of the Eleanor Jefferson Foundation. There were women in shelters tonight who needed safe housing. There were single mothers working multiple jobs who needed financial assistance. There were elderly women being pressured by their families to give up their independence who needed legal protection. My phone buzzed with a text message from Noah. Mom, please reconsider. We can start over. Be a real family again. I smiled as I typed my response. We were a real family for 40 years, until you decided I wasn't worth keeping. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. But new bridges can be constructed. The choice is yours. The next morning, Walter Jackson knocked on my door with a thermos of coffee and a newspaper. Thought you might like some company, he said, settling into a rocking chair on the porch. "How'd your dinner go last night?" "About as well as expected," I replied, pouring us both coffee. "They didn't take it well," Walter chuckled. "I bet they didn't. James knew they wouldn't. That's why he was so careful with all the legal preparations." "You knew about the lithium?" I asked. "Eleanor suspected it was there for decades. She and I were good friends. You know, she used to take soil samples all over the property. Said this land had more secrets than most people would ever guess." "Did you know her well?" I asked, eager to learn more about the woman whose legacy I now carried. Walter's eyes grew distant with memory. Eleanor was one hell of a woman. Brilliant, stubborn, fiercely independent. Back in the 60s, when I first moved here, people thought she was eccentric, a single woman living alone in the woods, always hiking around with her geology equipment. But she didn't care what anyone thought. "James never mentioned her to me," I said. "Not once in 43 years of marriage." Walter nodded thoughtfully. "She made him promise not to tell anyone about the mineral deposits until the time was right. She was worried that if the wrong people found out, they'd destroy the land for quick profit." And she was right to worry. The mining companies back then didn't care much about environmental impact. But why leave everything to me specifically, and not to James and me jointly? Walter smiled. "Eleanor had a saying, 'Men build fortunes, but women build legacies.' She believed that women were more likely to use wealth responsibly, to think about future generations rather than immediate gain." He paused. "And James agreed with her. He watched how you raised Noah, how you always put family first. He thought you were the perfect person to carry on Eleanor's vision." "I'm not sure I know what that vision is," I admitted. "Protecting the land while using its resources to help people who need it." Walter said simply, "Eleanor believed in balance. Take what you need, but give back more than you take." As we sat in companionable silence, I realized there was something more I needed to know. "Walter, did James ever mention anything about Noah investigating the property? Maybe reaching out to surveyors or mining companies?" Walter's expression darkened. "He did, about a year before he died. James found out that Noah had been talking to Centennial Mining Corp. Apparently, they'd approached Noah about the potential for lithium extraction on this land, and Noah had expressed interest in selling without ever mentioning it to you or James." My heart sank. So Noah had known about the lithium all along. He'd been planning to sell the land out from under us. "That's when James decided to change his will," Walter continued. "He originally planned to leave everything to both of you equally. But after he discovered Noah's secret negotiations, he realized that Noah couldn't be trusted to respect Eleanor's wishes. Or yours, for that matter." "And Abigail, did James say anything about her?" Walter hesitated. He was concerned about her influence on Noah. Said she seemed to bring out the worst in him, his materialism, his sense of entitlement. James worried that she married Noah for his potential inheritance rather than for love. I thought about the way Abigail had always asked about our family's finances, always pushed Noah to ask for money for their house, their cars, their vacations. How she'd redecorated our home as if preparing to take ownership of it. "I need to check something," I said suddenly, remembering the receipt I'd found in Noah's jacket. "Excuse me for a moment." I went inside and retrieved the slip of paper. Adirondack Surveying Services. I called the number listed on the receipt. "Hello, this is Cynthia Lewis. I'm calling about a survey that was done on my property in Lake George about 6 months ago. My son Noah Lewis arranged it, but I've misplaced the report. Let me check our records. Mrs. Lewis?" There was a pause as the receptionist typed something. "Yes, we have the survey here." It was actually commissioned by Abigail Turner Lewis, not Noah Lewis, and the report was sent directly to her at Centennial Mining Corporation. My blood ran cold. "Centennial Mining, are you sure?" "Yes, ma'am. The email address we have is at turner@centennialmining.com. Would you like us to send you a copy of the report?" "Please," I said, giving her my email address. "And thank you." I hung up and returned to the porch, my mind racing. "Walter, did you know that Abigail works for Centennial Mining?" Walter's eyebrows shot up. "No, I had no idea. Are you sure I showed him the email address the receptionist had given me?" "She never mentioned working in mining. She told us she was in marketing for a renewable energy company." "Well, Centennial has been trying to rebrand itself as environmentally responsible, Walter said. But they have a terrible track record, multiple EPA violations, contaminated water supplies near their extraction sites. They're one of the worst companies in the industry. The pieces were falling into place. Abigail hadn't just married Noah for his potential inheritance. She'd targeted him specifically because of this land and its mineral deposits. She'd been playing a much longer game than I'd realized. I need to talk to Patricia Chen again, I said. There may be more to this story than we know. The next day, I was sitting on the porch drinking tea when a black SUV pulled up. 2 men in suits emerged, carrying briefcases. "Mrs. Lewis," one called out as they approached. "I'm Craig Donovan from Apex Property Appraisals. Your daughter-in-law, Mrs. Turner Lewis, asked us to conduct a full valuation of this property." I set down my teacup slowly. Did she now, and did she mention that she doesn't own this property and has no authority to request such a valuation? The men exchanged glances. She indicated she was acting on behalf of the family trust, the second man said. "There is no family trust," I replied firmly. "This property belongs solely to me, and I did not authorize any appraisal. I'd like you both to leave immediately." "Mrs. Lewis, we have a signed authorization form," "which is fraudulent," I interrupted. "And if you don't leave my property now, I'll call the sheriff and report you for trespassing." They hesitated, clearly unsure what to do. At that moment, Walter emerged from the path that led from his cabin to mine. "Is there a problem, Cynthia?" he asked, eyeing the men suspiciously. "These gentlemen were just leaving," I said pointedly. "They made the mistake of accepting an unauthorized request from someone who has no legal right to access this property." Walter stepped closer, his tall frame imposing despite his age. "Sheriff Matthews is a good friend of mine. I'd be happy to call him if you need assistance explaining the concept of private property." The men backed away. "We apologize for the confusion. Mrs. Lewis?" "We'll be on our way." As they drove off, Walter turned to me. "Abigail's not giving up easily, is she?" "No," I said grimly, "and I suspect this is just the beginning." I was right. That afternoon, my phone rang with a call from Patricia Chen. "Mrs. Lewis, I wanted to alert you. Someone has filed a petition for guardianship over you in Westchester County Court, claiming you're mentally incompetent to manage your affairs." "Let me guess," I said. "Abigail?" "Actually, no. Noah filed the petition. But the supporting affidavit comes from Dr. Harrison Wright, a psychiatrist who claims to have evaluated you recently and found you suffering from early-stage dementia." "That's impossible," I gasped. "I've never met anyone named Harrison Wright in my life." "I suspected as much," Patricia said. "We'll fight this, of course, but you should know they're moving aggressively. The hearing is scheduled for next week." "Can they really do this?" I asked, my voice shaking despite my efforts to stay calm. "Declare me incompetent based on an evaluation that never happened, not successfully," Patricia assured me. "But they're hoping to get a temporary guardianship in place before we can mount a defense. Once they have control, even temporarily, they could try to invalidate any contracts you've signed, including the mineral rights leases." "What do we do?" "First, we get you evaluated by 3 independent psychiatrists to establish your mental competence beyond any doubt. Second, we file a counter-petition alleging fraud and seeking sanctions against Noah, Abigail, and this Dr. Wright. Third, we move quickly on finalizing the foundation paperwork so that even if, and this is extremely unlikely, they somehow gained temporary control, the foundation would already be established and funded." I took a deep breath. "Let's do it. All of it." After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence, silent. My own son was trying to have me declared incompetent. My own son was willing to lie in court, to fabricate medical evaluations, to steal my autonomy along with my property. How had it come to this? How had the baby I'd nursed, the child I'd read bedtime stories to, the young man I'd helped through college, become someone capable of such betrayal? My phone rang again. Noah. "What do you want?" I asked, not bothering to hide my anger. "Mom, I'm trying to help you," he said, his voice pleading. "You're making rash decisions. You're giving away millions to strangers when your own family needs it. That's not rational behavior. Not rational, I repeated. You think it's irrational for me to want to help women who've been mistreated, abandoned, or abused by their families. Women like me. Noah. You haven't been abused, he protested. That's an extreme exaggeration. We had one bad day, one argument. One bad day that revealed how you and Abigail truly see me, I cut in. As disposable, as worthless, as someone whose feelings and dignity don't matter. That's not fair. And now you're trying to have me declared incompetent based on an evaluation by a doctor I've never met. Tell me, Noah, how much did Abigail pay Dr. Wright to lie about my mental state? There was a telling silence. She works for Centennial Mining, I continued. Did you know that she's been after this land from the beginning? She married you because your father owned this property, and she's been manipulating you to get access to it ever since. That's ridiculous, Noah said, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Abigail loves me. She works in marketing for Eco Energy Solutions. Call Centennial Mining and ask for Abigail Turner, I suggested. See what they say. I don't have to do that. I know my wife. Did you know she commissioned a geological survey of this property 6 months ago? That she had the results sent directly to her at Centennial? Another silence. Mom, I don't know what you think you're doing, but this needs to stop. You're tearing our family apart with these accusations. I'm tearing the family apart, I laughed bitterly. Noah, you filed a legal petition to strip me of my autonomy based on a fraudulent medical report. You're the one who's declared war here, not me. It's not like that. We're worried about you. Living alone in the woods, making impulsive financial decisions. Stop lying, I said quietly. To me and to yourself. This is about money, plain and simple. And you've shown me exactly how far you're willing to go to get it. I hung up, my hands shaking with rage and grief. Outside, the afternoon light filtered through the autumn leaves, casting dappled shadows across the porch. The lake sparkled in the distance, peaceful and unchanging. How could something so beautiful be at the center of so much ugliness? I touched Eleanor's ring, drawing strength from its solid presence on my finger. I wasn't just fighting for myself now. I was fighting for Eleanor's legacy, for James's final gift to me, and for all the women who would benefit from the foundation I intended to create. I wouldn't let Noah and Abigail destroy that. Not for greed, not for revenge, not for anything. I called Patricia back. I want to accelerate everything, I said. How quickly can we establish the foundation and transfer the first round of funding? If we push, we could have it done by Friday, she said. But are you sure you want to move that fast? I'm sure, I said firmly. And one more thing. I want to add a specific provision to the Foundation's charter. What kind of provision? I smiled grimly. One that ensures Noah and Abigail can never benefit from the Foundation's assets, directly or indirectly, even if they try to present themselves as champions of women's causes in the future. That's unusually specific, Patricia said cautiously. Trust me, I replied. It's necessary. Abigail is clever and persistent. She'll try to find a way in, and I want to make sure every door is firmly closed. I'll draft the language today, Patricia promised. After we hung up, I walked down to the lake and sat on the dock, letting my feet dangle above the clear water. The mountains reflected perfectly on the still surface, creating a mirror world that seemed more peaceful than the real one. I remembered coming here with James years ago, when Noah was still a child. We'd fished from this very dock, laughed around campfires, watched shooting stars on clear summer nights. James had loved this place, but I'd always seen it as just a vacation spot, somewhere to visit occasionally, but not somewhere that mattered deeply. How wrong I'd been. This cabin, this land, this legacy, it mattered more than I could have imagined. Not just for the wealth it represented, but for the purpose it would give to the rest of my life. For the first time since James died, I felt truly alive again. I had a mission, a reason to get up in the morning that went beyond simply existing. I would build something lasting, something meaningful, something that would help others long after I was gone. And no one, not Noah, not Abigail, Not anyone was going to take that away from me. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity. I met with 3 different psychiatrists, all of whom confirmed what I already knew: I was perfectly competent, with no signs of cognitive impairment whatsoever. Patricia filed their reports with the court, along with our counter-petition alleging fraud. I also met with environmental consultants to discuss sustainable lithium extraction methods. The technology had advanced significantly in recent years, and there were now processes that minimized water usage and prevented soil contamination. They would cost more than traditional methods, reducing the profit margin, but the land would remain beautiful and unspoiled, just as Eleanor would have wanted. Walter introduced me to Jessie Thompson, who ran a women's shelter in Glens Falls. We spent an afternoon discussing the challenges faced by women in crisis, not just practical issues like housing and employment, but emotional ones like rebuilding self-worth after abuse. The biggest problem, Jessie explained, is that once a woman's confidence is shattered, it's incredibly difficult to rebuild. Many women return to abusive situations because they've been convinced they don't deserve better or can't survive on their own. I thought about how close I'd come to accepting Noah and Abigail's treatment, how I might have meekly moved into a senior community if James hadn't prepared this safety net for me. How easily self-doubt can creep in when the people who should love you the most tell you you're worthless. What if the foundation focused on rebuilding that confidence? I suggested, not just providing physical shelter, but creating programs that help women rediscover their worth, their abilities, their dreams. Jessie's eyes lit up. That would be incredible. Most funding goes to immediate needs: food, shelter, legal assistance. Almost nothing is available for the psychological rebuilding that has to happen for lasting change. By Friday, the Eleanor Jefferson Foundation for Women's Empowerment was officially established, with an initial endowment of $20 million. The board of directors included Jessie, Patricia, Walter, and myself, with provisions for adding 2 more directors who had personally experienced family abandonment or abuse. I was feeling cautiously optimistic when Patricia called with troubling news. Centennial Mining has filed an environmental impact challenge against the Sustainable Extraction Plan, she said. They're claiming the methods we've chosen aren't proven and could potentially cause more harm than traditional extraction. That's ridiculous, I said. We have independent studies confirming these methods are safer. It's a delay tactic, Patricia explained. They're trying to tie up the project in regulatory review while they pursue their guardianship case. If they can prevent you from moving forward with the current extraction partner, they might be able to step in later with a better offer after they've gained control of your affairs. Of course. How did they even know about our extraction plans? Those contracts were just finalized yesterday. Someone leaked the information, Patricia said grimly. We need to figure out who has access to our documents and might be feeding information to Centennial or to Abigail. A sickening thought struck me. Could it be Walter? He knows everything that's happening here. Possibly, but unlikely. He was James's closest friend for decades. Why would he betray that trust now? I don't know, I admitted. But we need to be careful. Abigail is clearly playing hardball, and she seems to be one step ahead of us. After hanging up, I walked over to Walter's cabin to share the news. As I approached, I heard voices through the open window, Walter's familiar rumble, and a woman's voice I didn't recognize. I paused, not wanting to interrupt, and then froze as I heard my name. Cynthia doesn't suspect anything, Walter was saying. She trusts me completely. Good, the woman replied. We need to keep it that way until everything is in place. The foundation complicates things, but we can work around it. And Noah, what about him? He's still in the dark, thinks this is all about protecting his mother from herself. He has no idea what's really at stake. My heart pounding, I backed away slowly, careful not to make a sound. Once I was a safe distance, I turned and hurried back to my cabin, my mind racing. Walter was working with someone, presumably Abigail, or someone connected to her. The one person I thought I could trust here was actually part of the conspiracy against me. I was truly alone. Back at the cabin, I locked all the doors and windows, then called Patricia. Walter is involved, I said without preamble. I overheard him talking to a woman about keeping me in the dark, about the foundation complicating their plans. Are you absolutely sure? Patricia asked. I heard it with my own ears, I insisted. He's been playing me this whole time, pretending to be James's loyal friend while actually working with Abigail or Centennial. This changes things, Patricia said. If Walter has been feeding them information, they know everything: our legal strategy, the foundation plans, the extraction contracts. What do we do? First, we need to identify the woman Walter was speaking with. If it's someone from Centennial, that's direct evidence of corporate espionage and attempted fraud. Second, we need to secure the cabin and all documents. And third, we need to prepare for the guardianship hearing with the understanding that they may have insider knowledge of our defense strategy. I glanced nervously out the window. Should I leave go somewhere safer? No, Patricia said firmly. That could be interpreted as erratic behavior, which would play into their narrative about your mental state. Stay put, but be vigilant. I'm sending my associate, Marcus, to stay with you until the hearing. He's a former police officer, and he'll make sure you're safe. After we hung up, I sat in the growing darkness, feeling the walls closing in. The cabin that had begun to feel like home now felt like a trap. The beautiful lake and mountains that had brought me peace now seemed to hide dangers and betrayals behind every tree. I jumped at a knock on the door, then relaxed slightly when I saw it was a delivery person with a package. I signed for it, brought it inside, and opened it cautiously. Inside was a sleek tablet with a note. Touch the screen to activate. PC. When I tapped the screen, Patricia's face appeared. I thought this would be safer than phone calls, she explained. This connection is fully encrypted. Now, I've been doing some digging into Walter Jackson. There's something you should know. He doesn't actually own his cabin. It's owned by Riverstone Holdings, which is a subsidiary of, let me guess, I interrupted, Centennial Mining. Patricia nodded grimly. Walter has been on their payroll for at least 5 years. Whatever he told you about being James's friend was likely a fabrication designed to gain your trust. But James left the message with Walter to give to me, I protested. About checking under the floorboard. Are you sure James left that message? Or did Walter claim James left it? Because if Walter led you to that metal box, it raises the question of what might have been in it originally and what might have been added or removed before you found it. My blood ran cold. Had the geological survey been planted? Was any of this real? Or had I been manipulated from the moment I arrived? The ring, I said suddenly. Eleanor's ring. Walter said James left it for me in the tackle box. Do you have any independent verification that the ring belonged to Eleanor? Any documentation or provenance? I shook my head slowly. No, just Walter's word and the note inside the box. I think we need to consider the possibility that this entire narrative about Eleanor Jefferson may have been fabricated or manipulated to guide your decisions in a particular direction, Patricia said carefully. We need to verify everything independently, starting with whether Eleanor Jefferson actually existed. The ground seemed to shift beneath me. If Walter had been lying, if the story of Eleanor was a fabrication, what did that mean for the foundation I'd just established, for the decisions I'd made, for my understanding of James's intentions? I need to know the truth, I said firmly. No matter what it is. I'm working on it, Patricia assured me. In the meantime, trust no one. Marcus will be there in the morning. Until then, stay inside and keep the doors locked. After Patricia signed off, I sat in the silent cabin, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. The photographs, the documents, the ring, could they all be elaborate props in a con game? And if so, what was the true prize they were after? I walked to the fireplace and took down the photograph of James and Eleanor. I studied it carefully in the lamplight. It certainly looked authentic, aged appropriately for a photo from the 1960s. And the young man was unmistakably James, with his characteristic slight smile and the cowlick that never quite lay flat. But the woman, could she be an actress hired to play a role? Could the photo be a sophisticated forgery? I turned it over again, running my fingers over James's handwriting on the back. That, at least, seemed genuine. I'd seen his handwriting nearly every day for 43 years. The distinctive way he crossed his T's and looped his G's was impossible to miss, unless that, too, had been expertly forged. I sank into a chair, overwhelmed by doubt and fear. Who could I trust? What could I believe? The world had become a house of mirrors, with distortions and deceptions everywhere I looked. As darkness fell completely, I heard a vehicle approaching outside. Headlights swept across the windows, then went dark. Car doors slammed. Footsteps crunched on the gravel path. Someone was coming, and I was all alone. I peered cautiously through the curtains. 2 figures were moving toward the cabin, one tall and broad-shouldered, the other smaller and distinctly feminine. As they stepped into the pool of light from the porch lamp, I recognized Noah and a woman I'd never seen before. Not Abigail. I hesitated, then grabbed the fireplace poker just in case before opening the door a crack. "Mom," Noah said, looking haggard and exhausted. "Please, we need to talk." "Who's this?" I asked, nodding toward the woman. "I'm Diana Reeves," she said, extending her hand. "I'm an investigator with the State Attorney General's Office, Financial Crimes Division. May we come in?" "It's important." I studied them both for a long moment, then reluctantly stood aside, keeping the poker within reach. "Why are you here?" I asked once they were seated. "And where's Abigail?" Noah ran a hand through his hair, which looked like it hadn't been washed in days. "I don't know where Abigail is. She's gone, disappeared, and so has most of our savings." "Mrs. Lewis," Diana said, pulling out a badge and credentials. "We believe your daughter-in-law is part of a sophisticated fraud scheme targeting valuable properties with mineral rights. Your son has been cooperating with our investigation since yesterday when he discovered evidence of her deception." I looked at Noah, who couldn't meet my eyes. "So you finally figured it out," I said quietly. He nodded miserably. "I found emails on her laptop. She's been working with Centennial for years. They identified this property back when Dad was still alive and sent her to get close to me." His voice broke. "Our entire marriage was a lie." Despite everything, my heart ached for him. No matter how angry I was, Noah was still my son, and he'd been hurt deeply. "Mrs. Lewis," Diana continued, "we have reason to believe you're in danger. Walter Jackson is not who he claims to be. His real name is Walter Jennings, and he's worked for Centennial as what they call a property acquisition specialist for over a decade. He specializes in manipulating elderly property owners into selling valuable land for a fraction of its worth." "And James," I asked, dreading the answer, "was his friendship with Walter real?" "As far as we can tell, no," Diana said gently. "Mr. Jennings likely fabricated that relationship to gain your trust. We believe he may have altered documents or created forgeries to support whatever narrative he was constructing." "What about Eleanor Jefferson? Was she real?" Diana nodded. "She was, and she did own this property before your husband. But the rest of the story, her relationship with your husband, the geological surveys, perhaps even the ring, those may have been fabricated or manipulated to guide your decisions in a particular direction." I touched Eleanor's ring, feeling as if the floor was falling away beneath me. What direction if Walter or Jennings wanted me to sell to Centennial? Why create an elaborate story about Eleanor wanting to protect the land? "Because," Noah said, speaking up for the first time, "they knew you wouldn't sell if you thought that's what they wanted. The emails I found showed their whole strategy. They wanted you to think you were outsmarting them by leasing the mineral rights to their competitor, Green Tech Solutions, which is actually a shell company owned by Centennial," Diana added. "The sustainable extraction methods they proposed would have left the land permanently damaged and the groundwater contaminated. But by the time anyone realized what was happening, the damage would be done. And you'd have no recourse." My mind was reeling. "But the foundation, the leasing contracts, all part of their plan," Diana confirmed. "The foundation gave them a perfect vehicle to funnel money through while appearing philanthropic, and the leasing contracts contained clauses that would have given them control over the entire property once extraction began." "Patricia Chen," I said suddenly, "is she involved too?" Diana and Noah exchanged glances. "There is no Patricia Chen at Chen, Washington and Associates," Diana said carefully. "The firm exists, but no one named Patricia Chen works there. The woman you've been dealing with is likely Carmen Delgado, another Centennial operative. She specializes in creating fraudulent legal documents." I felt physically ill. Every person I'd trusted since arriving at the cabin had been lying to me. Every document I'd signed had been part of an elaborate con. Even the foundation I'd been so proud of was just another tool in their scheme. So what now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Now we catch them, Diana said firmly. Your son has agreed to wear a wire and meet with Abigail, who's reached out asking to reconcile. Meanwhile, we've set up surveillance on Walter Jennings and tracked Carmen Delgado to a hotel in Albany. We believe they're all meeting tonight to finalize their plans before the extraction equipment arrives tomorrow. Tomorrow? I gasped. They're moving that quickly. They have to, Noah explained. The real Patricia Chen, the actual attorney Dad worked with, is returning from maternity leave on Monday. Once she reviews the firm's recent activities, the whole scheme will unravel. Wait, I said, trying to make sense of it all. If James really did work with the real Patricia Chen, then some of this must be true. The lithium deposit, the land. It's all true, Diana confirmed. Your husband did leave you this property, and it does contain a valuable lithium deposit. That's what made you a target. What's false is the narrative they created around it, the story of Eleanor's special connection to your husband, the sustainable extraction plan, the foundation's legitimacy. They used just enough truth to make the lies believable. I sat back, trying to absorb it all. And you want my help to catch them? Diana nodded. We need you to act as if nothing has changed. Walter will likely come by in the morning to check on you and ensure you're still on board with the extraction plans. If you can keep him talking while we position our team, we can arrest him here along with any other Centennial representatives who show up. And Abigail? I asked, looking at Noah. I'm meeting her at a hotel in Saratoga Springs tonight, he said grimly. She thinks I'm ready to join their scheme in exchange for a cut of the profits. Once she incriminates herself, the FBI will move in. I studied my son's face, seeing real pain and determination there. Whatever his previous mistakes, he was trying to make things right now. I'll do it, I decided. But on one condition. When this is over, I want to know exactly what James intended with this property. I want to see his original will, his real instructions, not the version they created to manipulate me. That's already in progress, Diana assured me. The real Patricia Chen has been contacted and is reviewing the actual files remotely. By Monday, we should have clarity on your husband's true wishes. After Diana left to coordinate with her team, Noah and I were left alone in the quiet cabin. The silence between us was heavy with unspoken words. I'm sorry, Mom, he finally said, his voice breaking. I was an idiot. I let Abigail manipulate me, use me against you. I failed you completely. I wanted to stay angry, to hold on to the hurt and betrayal. But seeing him so broken, so genuinely remorseful, melted something inside me. We were both manipulated. Noah, I said softly, by people who made deception their profession. The question is, what do we do now? I don't know, he admitted. I've lost my wife, my home, my job, everything, but I deserve it. All of it. Your job, too. He nodded miserably. Turns out Abigail arranged my position at Westford Partners. My boss was another Centennial associate. Once I started cooperating with the investigation, I was fired immediately. For the first time, I saw my son clearly not as the successful, confident man he'd appeared to be, but as someone who'd been used and discarded, just as I had been. In that moment, my anger gave way to compassion. We'll figure it out, I promised. Together. He looked up, hope and disbelief warring in his eyes. After everything I've done, you'd still help me. You're my son, Noah. That hasn't changed. I reached across the table and took his hand. We've both been hurt, but maybe we can heal together. As Noah left to meet Abigail, wearing a wire and surrounded by undercover agents, I felt a strange mixture of fear and determination. Tomorrow would bring either justice or further betrayal. Either way, I would face it with the truth finally on my side. Morning broke clear and cold over Lake George. I'd barely slept, my mind racing with questions and revelations. Around 9 a.m., Walter Jennings knocked on my door, his familiar friendly smile now seeming sinister in light of what I knew. Morning, Cynthia, he called cheerfully. Thought you might like some fresh blueberry muffins. Made them myself. I forced a smile, aware of the microphone taped to my collarbone beneath my sweater and the FBI agents positioned in the woods around the cabin. "How thoughtful," I said, letting him in. "Coffee." "Don't mind if I do." He settled comfortably at the kitchen table, looking completely at ease. It was chilling to see how naturally deception came to him. "Big day today. The green tech folks should be arriving around noon to finalize the extraction plans. They're bringing the initial payment to $12 million. Imagine that." "It's certainly life-changing," I agreed, pouring coffee into Eleanor's china cups, or rather cups that may or may not have belonged to a woman named Eleanor. Everything in the cabin now felt suspect, tainted by lies. "I'm still trying to wrap my head around it all." Walter nodded sympathetically. "It's a lot to process, but James would be proud of how you're handling it. Creating that foundation, ensuring the land is protected while still benefiting from its resources, you're honoring Eleanor's legacy beautifully." I had to admire his commitment to the charade. Even now. "Tell me more about Eleanor," I said, sitting across from him. "You mentioned you knew her personally." "Oh yes, she was quite a character." He launched into a detailed description of a woman he'd likely never met, creating vivid anecdotes about her stubbornness, her intelligence, her dedication to conservation. I let him talk, nodding and asking questions occasionally, giving the FBI team time to move into position. Through the window, I caught glimpses of movement in the trees, agents closing in. "And when will Patricia be joining us?" I asked casually. Walter's muffin paused halfway to his mouth. Carmen Delgado," I clarified, watching his face carefully. "That is her real name, isn't it?" His expression shifted, the friendly mask falling away. "Cynthia, I'm not sure what you're talking about." "I think you are." "Walter, or should I call you Mr. Jennings?" He set down the muffin slowly, his eyes darting to the windows, the door, calculating escape routes. "Who have you been talking to?" "The FBI, the State Attorney General's office," I said calmly. "Oh, and Noah. He's been very cooperative since discovering his wife's true employer." Walter's hand moved toward his jacket pocket, but before he could reach whatever was there, the front door burst open, and armed agents rushed in. "Walter Jennings, you're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and attempted grand larceny," announced a stern-faced agent, while others secured Walter and read him his rights. As they led him out, Walter looked back at me, his expression a mixture of anger and something like respect. "You're tougher than we gave you credit for. Cynthia, James would have been proud." "Don't you dare speak my husband's name," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "You never knew him. You never knew either of us." Within the hour, the cabin was transformed into a command center as more agents arrived. Diana returned with news that Noah's operation had been successful. Abigail and 3 Centennial executives had been arrested at the hotel in Saratoga Springs. Carmen Delgado had been apprehended at Albany International Airport, attempting to flee to Mexico. "It's over," Diana assured me. "They're all in custody, and we've frozen the assets of the shell companies they created. The foundation, the leasing agreements, all of it will be unwound. You'll be able to start fresh with the real facts about your property." "And what are those real facts?" I asked. "Does the land actually contain lithium?" "It does," she confirmed. "Your husband had it surveyed legitimately about a year before he died. The deposit is actually larger than Centennial estimated, worth closer to $100 million. I shook my head, overwhelmed. "And now what? What am I supposed to do with a $100 million lithium deposit?" "That's entirely up to you," Diana said. "But first, I think there's someone you should meet." She opened the door, and a petite woman with silver hair and intelligent eyes stepped in. She carried a leather portfolio and walked with the confident stride of someone who had spent a lifetime being underestimated and proving people wrong. "Mrs. Lewis, this is Patricia Chen, the real Patricia Chen." The woman extended her hand with a warm smile. "I'm so sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. James spoke of you often and with great love." "You really knew my husband?" I asked, searching her face for any sign of deception. "For over 20 years, she confirmed. "He was one of my first clients when I joined the firm, and we became friends over time. When he was diagnosed with heart disease, he came to me immediately to update his estate plans. He was determined to ensure you would be taken care of, no matter what happened. And this property, the lithium, was that part of his plan? Patricia opened her portfolio and removed a sealed envelope. James left this for you. He asked that I deliver it personally if anything ever happened to cast doubt on his intentions. She handed it to me. I think it will answer your questions better than I can. With trembling hands, I broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. James's familiar handwriting brought tears to my eyes. My beloved Cynthia, if you're reading this, then Patricia has determined that my original plans for our estate have been compromised in some way. I always feared this might happen, given the value of what lies beneath the Lake George property. So let me state clearly what I intended. The cabin and all surrounding land is yours, solely and completely. I purchased it from Eleanor Jefferson's estate in 1994, drawn to it because of childhood memories of summers spent there. Eleanor was indeed a pioneering geologist, though I never knew her personally. She died in her 90s, leaving no heirs, and the property was sold to settle tax debts. What Eleanor never knew, but what modern geological surveys have confirmed, is that the property contains a significant lithium deposit. I discovered this accidentally when exploring water table maps for a potential well. When the full survey confirmed the value of the deposit, I knew I needed to protect it, and you, from those who would exploit it. Noah knows nothing about the lithium. I made this decision deliberately, concerned about the materialistic values Abigail seemed to be encouraging in him. I hoped that with time, he might mature and rediscover the compassionate young man he once was, but I couldn't risk your security on that hope. Whatever has happened to bring this letter to you, know this: you have options. You can sell the mineral rights outright. You can lease them. You can leave the lithium in the ground and simply enjoy the beautiful land above it. The choice is yours, as it always should be. If you're reading this, you've likely been through a difficult ordeal, and for that, I am deeply sorry. I tried to protect you from afar, but perhaps in doing so, I created vulnerabilities I didn't foresee. Remember that you are stronger than you know, wiser than you give yourself credit for, and deserving of security and happiness. Choose your path forward based on your own values, not on what others expect or demand of you. I have loved you since the moment I saw you in that university library 45 years ago, and I love you still, wherever I may be, always and forever. James P. If you're wondering about the emerald ring I mentioned in my will, it was my grandmother's, not Eleanor's. It's in the safe deposit box at Albany National Bank. Box number 247. The key is taped to the back of our wedding photograph in my study. I had always planned to give it to you on our 45th anniversary. Tears streamed down my face as I finished reading. This was James, my James, whose voice came through so clearly in every word. Not the mysterious, manipulative figure Walter had described, but the thoughtful, loving man I'd shared my life with. He knew, I whispered. He knew someone might try to manipulate me, and he prepared for it. Patricia nodded. James was very perceptive about people. He had concerns about Abigail from the beginning and worried that Noah was becoming too materialistic under her influence. That's why he structured things the way he did. And the foundation was that his idea too. No, Patricia said gently. That appears to have been entirely fabricated by Carmen Delgado to create a vehicle they could control while appearing to honor your wishes. But, she added with a smile, that doesn't mean it's not a good idea. James often spoke of your desire to help other women, your compassion for those who struggled. A foundation would be perfectly in line with the values he knew you held. I sat quietly, absorbing it all. The truth. Finally. No manipulations. No schemes. Just James's clear intentions and his unwavering love. What happens now? I asked Diana. The criminal cases will proceed, though with the evidence we've gathered, most will likely accept plea deals rather than go to trial. Your property rights will be fully restored, and any fraudulent documents will be invalidated. As for the lithium, she added, that's entirely your decision, as James intended. And Noah, I asked, Will he face charges for his role in the guardianship petition? Diana shook her head. He's been granted immunity in exchange for his cooperation, but he'll likely need to testify against Abigail and the others, which won't be easy. As if summoned by his name, Noah appeared in the doorway, looking utterly exhausted but somehow lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted from him. "It's done," he said simply. "They have everything they need from me." Patricia and Diana excused themselves tactfully, leaving Noah and me alone once again. "I read Dad's letter," I told him, holding it out. "The real one." He took it hesitantly, as if afraid of what he might find there. As he read, I saw emotions play across his face: shock, grief, shame, and finally, a kind of sad acceptance. "He saw right through her," Noah said quietly, "from the very beginning, and I was too blind to notice." "We see what we want to see in the people we love," I said gently. I did the same with Walter, believed him because I wanted to believe someone understood what James had intended. Noah handed the letter back, his eyes red-rimmed. "What will you do now with the land, the lithium?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But I think I will create a foundation, a real one this time. Not because someone manipulated me into it, but because it's what I want to do. Women who've been deceived and manipulated, who've lost their sense of worth and identity, I understand them now in a way I never did before." "And me?" Noah asked, his voice small. "Is there a place for me in your life going forward?" I studied my son's face, the boy I'd raised, the man who'd hurt me, the person now seeking redemption. The easy answer would be unconditional forgiveness, an immediate restoration of our relationship. But real healing, I knew, would require something more honest. "That depends on you, Noah," I said finally. "Not on a single apology or moment of regret, but on the choices you make going forward. On whether you're willing to rebuild not just our relationship, but your own character. It won't be quick, and it won't be easy." He nodded, accepting this hard truth. "I want to try. I don't deserve a second chance, but if you're willing to give me one, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of it." "Then we'll begin there," I said, "with trying." Spring came to Lake George in a burst of green, transforming the landscape from the stark beauty of winter to a lush paradise of new growth. I stood on the porch of the newly renovated cabin, watching as workmen put the finishing touches on the main building of the Eleanor Jefferson Center for Women's Renewal. Yes, I'd kept the name. Despite the deception surrounding her connection to James, Eleanor Jefferson had been a remarkable woman in her own right, a pioneering female geologist who deserved to be remembered. And in a strange way, the elaborate fiction Walter had created around her had contained a core of truth that resonated with me, the idea that women needed to reclaim their power and independence, especially after betrayal. The real Patricia Chen, now both my attorney and my friend, had helped me establish a legitimate foundation, with a board of directors that included experts in women's advocacy, mental health, and financial empowerment. We'd negotiated an environmentally responsible lithium extraction agreement that would provide sustainable funding for decades while protecting the beauty of the land. The center itself was designed to be a temporary home for women in transition, particularly older women who found themselves suddenly displaced by divorce, widowhood, or family rejection. Besides safe housing, we offered counseling, legal advocacy, financial planning, and perhaps most importantly, a community of mutual support. "It's looking good," said a voice behind me. Noah stood at the foot of the porch steps, a toolbox in one hand. He'd been helping with the construction whenever his new job allowed teaching mathematics at a community college in Albany, a humble position compared to his former corporate career, but one he seemed to find genuinely satisfying. "Right on schedule," I agreed. "We should be ready to welcome our first residents next month." Our relationship remained a work in progress. There were moments of connection and understanding, and others of lingering hurt and distrust. But we were building something new, based on honesty rather than obligation, and that felt more valuable than the easy forgiveness I might once have granted. "I found something in Dad's old files that I thought you should have," Noah said, climbing the steps and handing me a faded photograph. I was going through the last boxes from the storage unit. It was a picture of James as a young man, standing proudly in front of the cabin. He looked about 20, with a fishing rod in one hand and a string of trout in the other, grinning with the unself-conscious joy of youth. He loved this place, Noah said quietly. I remember how his whole demeanor would change when we came up here for vacation. It was the only time I ever saw him truly relax. He never told me how much it meant to him, I mused, tracing James's youthful face with my finger. There were so many things we never shared, even after decades together. I think he was trying to protect you, Noah suggested, from worries, from burdens. He always saw that as his job. Perhaps, I tucked the photo carefully into my pocket. But I wish he'd trusted me with the truth. All of it. We might have faced whatever came together. Noah nodded, understanding the unspoken parallel to our own situation, how his attempts to protect me from decisions about my future had ultimately caused more harm than good. Mom, he said hesitantly, there's something else. I've been offered a teaching position at a school in Vermont. It would mean moving away, at least during the academic year. Vermont, I couldn't hide my surprise. That's quite a change. It is, but I think I needed a fresh start. Somewhere Abigail and I never lived. Somewhere I can figure out who I am without her influence. He looked down at his hands. But I don't want to feel like I'm abandoning you again. I thought about it for a moment, weighing my instinctive desire to keep him close against what might actually be best for both of us. I think you should take it, I said finally. We've both learned that proximity doesn't guarantee closeness. We can build our relationship regardless of distance. Relief washed over his face. You're sure? I'm sure that you need to make choices based on what's right for you, not what you think I want or need. That's how we got into trouble in the first place, isn't it? Making assumptions about each other's best interests. He smiled ruefully. When did you get so wise? Around the time I realized how foolish I'd been, I replied, but returned his smile to soften the words. Life is a better teacher than we give it credit for. That evening, I sat alone on the dock, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of pink and gold. A loon called across the water, its haunting cry echoing off the distant shore. I thought about the journey of the past 6 months from displacement to empowerment, from betrayal to rebuilding. I thought about James, who had tried in his own imperfect way to protect me, and about Noah, stumbling toward redemption one difficult step at a time. I thought about the women who would soon find sanctuary here, each with her own story of loss and resilience. And I thought about Eleanor Jefferson, the real woman whose pioneering spirit had inadvertently lent her name to this new beginning. From my pocket, I took out the emerald ring, the real one that had been waiting in the safe deposit box, just as James had written. Unlike the forgery Walter had given me, this ring was smaller, less ostentatious, but somehow more beautiful in its authenticity. I slipped it onto my finger, feeling a connection to James that transcended death and deception. The cabin I'd inherited had turned out to be so much more than a consolation prize. It had become the catalyst for a transformation I never could have imagined, from a woman who defined herself through others to one who stood firmly on her own ground. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared, I made my way back to the cabin, its windows glowing with warm light. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to help others find their way back from loss, just as I had done. For now, though, I simply sat by the fire James had loved, in the cabin that had become my home, and felt at peace. The treasures I'd found here weren't just the minerals beneath the ground, but the strength I'd discovered within myself, the most unexpected inheritance of all. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below and tell me about your experiences. Also, don't miss 2 other channel favorites. My daughter tried to put me in a nursing home until she found out who really owned our family business, and after 40 years of marriage, my husband left me for his secretary, then he came crawling back.